My name is Catherine. I'm one of the events managers at the Wine Society, and we're thrilled that you're all joining us. If you are joining with the wines, we'd love to know what you think, so please do use the chat function. And if you've got questions for Ben, Sam and Freddie, please do also use the Q&A. I'll be popping up periodically to ask the questions, or we'll be saving them till the end. So Freddie, if you're ready, I'll hand over to you.
Freddie is always ready. I'm here. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We've got a couple of great wines from a couple of great winemakers to enjoy. And as Catherine said, do please type your questions in the chat box, and we'll come to those. We'll try and come to as many of those as possible at the end if we haven't gotten to them during the conversation. So Catherine will be keeping an eye on those. For those of you who I haven't had a chance to meet previously at an event or anything like that, I am the Australia and New Zealand buyer at the Wine Society. I've been at the Wine Society for 11 years in a couple of months, which is quite scary. But in the last few years, I've had the pleasure of working with Australia and New Zealand, which have been really exciting countries to work with. And both countries have, well, quite an established reputation. But I think there's also a lot going on in terms of winemaking in both that we don't really see as much of in the UK as perhaps we should, or certainly not as much as I would like us to. So it's been kind of my mission to reflect really what's going on in Australia and New Zealand and bring that to our Wine Society range. So one of the great parts of my job, something I feel very lucky for, is the fact that I get to go out to Australia and New Zealand and really kind of, I guess, get under the skin of both countries and find out what's really going on there. And one of the other real pleasures, I guess, is the people. They're so collaborative, which is fantastic. There's not this kind of sense of gatekeeping amongst the producers in both those countries. Rather, they're really, I guess, excited about each other's wines, which is brilliant, because it means that I've been able to make some discoveries thanks to folks that we already work with, and you know, I guess in the end put together a range which is, I think, that step above, which is important. We've got a couple of winemakers joining us this evening who are a real core part of the range of their respective countries. So we've got Sam from Whistler in the Barossa Valley, South Australia, and Ben from Zephyr in Marlborough, New Zealand. I'm going to hand over to them in just a minute to allow them to introduce themselves and give a bit of background on their stories. But one of the main reasons, I guess, that we are here and we've got these two guys joining us is to do with a very special range of wines, the Generation Series for our 150th anniversary at the Wine Society. So hopefully a lot of you at home have got these wines in your glasses and ready to go. But I thought it'd be probably sensible to give just a bit of background on the Generation Series, because it's great to obviously make sure everyone's on the same page. So what with us celebrating 150 years of the Wine Society this year, we wanted to mark the occasion with a couple of limited edition ranges of wines. Some of you may have seen the Anniversary Series, which is a sort of fine wine range of wines that we started buying 10 or so years ago and have been maturing at the Wine Society and have released those this year. And in addition to that, we wanted to do something which marked or recognized key wine styles throughout the history of the business. So that's where the Generation Series comes in. So this is a range which has been so far launched in kind of 3 tranches. We've got a 4th one on the way, and each of those is shining a spotlight on 50 years of wine styles at the Wine Society. So at the beginning of the year, we kicked off with wines that were popular between 1874 and 1924. We then moved on to the second lot, which was 24 to 74. And now we have the 3rd tranche of 4, which is celebrating wine styles that were really popular or are really popular currently from 74 to now. Marlborough Sauvignon is, of course, a wine style that's definitely up there with one of the most famous styles in the world. Even a lot of people that aren't necessarily or wouldn't necessarily consider themselves wine drinkers, wine lovers, have probably heard of Marlborough Sauvignon. And Barossa Shiraz as well is a very, very famous style. And we wanted to, I guess, hark back somewhat to the styles of these two wines that made them really, really popular in the first place. Marlborough Sauvignon is a relatively new category, I guess, in the scheme of things. Marlborough as a region hasn't been around for as long as the Barossa. But that being said, the wine world has been taken by storm, and we wanted to work with somebody who we thought could do a great job of recreating the style that put this type of wine on the map, really. So I, of course, reached out to Ben at Zephyr for that. And then with Barossa Shiraz, before the impact of some of the key wine critics in the 90s and noughties, it was actually a slightly lighter and more fruity style of wine than we kind of, I guess, often associated with being today. And Whistler and the Barossa, what's really key for them is freshness, balance, lift in their wines. And I thought they'd be really well placed to recreate that slightly lighter, brighter style. So Sam's worked on that for us as well. I reckon it's probably good to bring Ben and Sam into the chat. So hi guys, thank you for joining us. This is quite pandemic-y, isn't it? I haven't done one of these for quite a few years. How are you feeling? You've not got a cough, have you?
Mate, I'm great. I'm really good.
That's all right. Yeah, but look, the sun's shining behind you, because that's definitely not just a backdrop, and you're definitely not just sitting in Manchester in the UK. You're actually in the Barossa, right?
You know what? I unfortunately don't have enough money to stay in a really nice hotel and have a beautiful room, so I just thought I'd throw this background on.
And Ben, you've got at least a slightly more delicious looking background there, load of bottles of wine. You're currently in London, am I right?
Yeah, I'm parked up in a really cool sort of restaurant wine bar called Joe's Brasserie.
Pretty handy.
And they've kindly allowed me to park up for an hour and do this wonderful Zoom tasting.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I should explain to.
I haven't been parked up here all day, so it's all good.
I don't believe you.
Now.
I don't believe you.
Yeah.
I don't believe you for a second. We should explain to members who may not know, the reason both of these guys are in the UK is because we've done a couple of events to celebrate the 150th anniversary over the weekend. So we've been up in Manchester on Friday and Saturday, doing a couple of big walk-around tastings for members who are in the area. And both these guys have flown over from New Zealand and Australia, especially for us, which has been a real privilege. So yeah, we're really glad to have you. So Ben, since we've got you, why don't you kick off? It'd be great if you could tell us a little bit about your background as a winemaker and a bit about Zephyr.
Yeah, most certainly, Freddie. Thank you very much. And I think it's a really cool opportunity to do this with the membership through the Wine Society. And you've alluded to that we're a pretty young nation, or a wine growing nation. We don't necessarily have the 150 years of or plus like the Barossa does. And so if you sort of go back 50 years, that's sort of when the first plantings were planted in Marlborough, so the early 70s. And it wasn't probably until the early 80s that it hit the shores of the UK and basically wowed the I suppose the critics and the what we now call influencers in this modern world, but the writers and it was just a whole new way of looking at wine. It was so fresh and vibrant and it really spoke of New Zealand. A young colony of Mother England in some respects, and it was bright, blue sky, green grass, heaps of sheep, and 4 or 5 million people. And I think basically just as pioneers, as Kiwis and Australians are, we're always the glass is always half full, and we really and we didn't know any better. So there was a lovely amount of naivety in taking this wine back to probably the home of wine drinking, which by that stage and still now is the UK with its fantastic wine trade. And so I was probably pretty lucky enough to be hanging around then. I'm a 70s baby with an 80s music genre set, and so we basically grew up on a dairy farm. So we're 4th generation dairy farmers, mum and dad and myself and co. But it was about the mid 80s that Dad sort of started getting interested in what was going on over the fence. And he'd played around with kiwi fruit as well as being the main in Karma's dairy farming. And and garlic for that matter. So at one stage, him and 5 other guys were the largest garlic growers in New Zealand and exporting a huge amount of garlic to Australia and Fiji. So he'd sort of diversified or dabbled in other parts. And then obviously this vine, this weed that just wants to grow to the sun, particularly Sauvignon Blanc, aggressive and upright, turned up on the doorstep in Marlborough. And he sold the dairy farm in about 85 and planted 20 acres of grapes, 8 hectares of grapes in 1988. And then from then on, we're now farming about 70 odd hectares, 150 acres. I think it's because he realised none of his kids wanted to get up in 4 o'clock in the morning and milk cows back then, and he knew he had to perhaps come up with another vocation. So, and I think it's been quite grape growing. Obviously, is it's tough, but probably not as hard on the body as say dairy farming, where you're milking, in the morning and then again at night time. I just remember Dad as a young kid always being asleep on the couch, and me thinking, Jesus, you're a lazy farmer. But he'd already done 8 hours, starting at 3 in the morning. So, and I think I went to uni and stuff, failed accounting, failed finance, failed stats, struggled with chemistry, which apparently you need as a winemaker. And then I thought I'll go and do winemaking and to get a winemaking and viticulture degree and come back and kick Dad off the farm. Now that has not happened. He is still there, running the show, and hats off to him for that. To be honest, he's still a critical part of particularly our wine growing business. And I think that they have such these old fellas, or whatever, they've been around for a long time, and they just have a lovely intuitive touch about what's going on their properties, regardless of crop. So that was in the 80s, and then do you want me to talk a bit more what I've done, Freddie? Is that what you're sort of alluding to? Or
that'd be great, Ben. Yeah, just give us a bit of a background on your kind of career and how you've ended up getting to where you are now.
Yeah. So about 1998, I started off with a guy called Brent Maris in Wither Hills, and there was a winemaker for Oyster Bay that obliterated the UK, and then also in the early days, and also in the US. And then he took me on, and I took a punt together and built Wither Hills up, up until about 2016 when I finally, or 2013 when I left Wither Hills as their chief winemaker, and then went to Mudhouse Group for about 4 years. And built that up into the UK trade. So they were quite big and strong brands in their day. But that was me with my corporate winemaking hat on. And my wife, Susie, always used to refer to it as blood money. The corporate winemaking scene is quite different to running your own business. And I think for me, I've discovered I'm quite entrepreneurial, and layers of people and management doesn't quite go together. And I think particularly with winemaking or wine growing, you need to have your feet on the soil, but then also you need to have your hands and your head in the marketplace. You can't never the twain should meet is not an option really with wine. Otherwise, you just lose sight of what you're trying to deliver to your customer, in our wine society drinker. You can lose sight of it. So in 2016, I left the corporate salary, which was awesome, and took the punt and went out on my own with my wife Susie, and we'd launched the Zephyr brand in 2007, but it was sort of like a side hustle for those 10 years, and then finally got guts enough to go live. And that was sort of around 2016, and we're still doing that now. So
I think it's absolutely bang on what you say about the importance of having your feet on the soil and being in the vineyards. And I guess it's a bit of a cliche to say, really, but great wine is made in the vineyards. And actually, that's very much something which is the case for you, Sam, isn't it? At Whistler, very much again, also 4th generation in agriculture, albeit specifically 4 generations of grape growers. Can you give us a bit of background, Sam, on Whistler, how it got started, and in particular, it'd be great to give a bit of background on your childhood growing up in a Penfolds vineyard.
Yeah, mate. And thanks, Ben. I always love hearing other people's stories because it's so interesting. We all come from all these different kind of backgrounds, and a lot of it does have to do with farming, especially in generational, and that's the key. My dad always has drummed into me from a young age that you can make bad wine out of good grapes, but you can't make good wine out of bad grapes. So it's pretty key to farming's the important element, and that's what it's all about. But yeah, so look, I'm fourth generation grape grower, I guess. Here, my great grandfather had a vineyard up in Loxton, which is in the Riverland, and then after that, Hubert Irving, his son. So my grandpa, he also had some fruit there as well, and just sold it to other companies. And then my dad, similar to Ben, but he failed a lot younger. He failed apparently like year 8, 10, and 12. So so he was a little bit before the university days. But he was a very good footballer. So he got asked to come to the Barossa Valley and play football, which he ended up captaining 3 premierships at the mighty Newry Tigers. And that's where he got the job with Penfolds. That came with.
I'm sure that football team means so much to this audience. And I'm sure everyone's gone wild. There'll be members here with did you say Newry Tigers memorabilia all over the walls? So great.
Yes, it's pretty much like the Euros that a lot of you guys are watching right now.
There you go.
Yeah. But basically, he started at the ripe age of 17 kind of thing in the vineyards, and I'll never forget the story when my dad was 20. He was working out at Kalimna, which is the home of Penfolds Grange, and he'd kind of slowly worked his way up to be, I guess, like duty manager at the time, and Ron Harris was running the Kalimna site, and he was looking towards retirement, and my dad got asked to move to Morgan in the Riverland and plant the largest vineyard in the Southern Hemisphere at the time. And my dad was 20 years old, just before his 21st birthday, and he said to Ron, he said, "Well, I'll do it." He was married to my mum at the time. He said, "I'll do it, but on the basis that when you retire, I come back and live at Kalimna and take over your job." And he said they shook hands, and back then handshakes mean everything. There was no corporate kind of decision, and so there he went. He went up there, and about 4 days before his 21st birthday, he rocks up to this site, which is basically like a desert, on cliff tops, before the river, and he said there was about 180 men standing there, and he went into the office and said, what are all these guys doing? And they said, "Well, they're waiting for you to tell them what to do." And he was like, "I just had no idea what to do. I was 20 years old and had to plant the responsibility of planting some of the largest vineyards in the Southern Hemisphere." Actually, up there's so much limestone and it's very dry. He used dynamite to put in the strainer posts. So they literally had to blow up holes, and my dad had to come up with all these things. But anyway, it's a little bit of a digression, but I guess it kind of goes back to, it was a very different time back then, and loyalty and being loyal to people, something that still exists in the Barossa a lot. I don't have any real contracts with any growers. I do a lot of handshake stuff still. And it means the world. You look someone in the eye and you tell them you're going to do that, and that's what's going to happen. So look, I was very lucky. My dad did end up moving back to Kalimna, which is in the Barossa Valley. It's the home of Penfolds Grange. and he ended up running all their vineyards nationally for close to 30 years. And when he retired, they gifted him some of the original Penfolds Grange clone instead of a gold watch or anything. If anyone who's on here gets to meet my dad, he is not a he's not a gold watch guy, put it that way. He's a kick the dirt around farmer, and he really, he was interested in sourcing some of that pedigree, I guess, that Penfolds was able to offer. So we think we're one of 3 vineyards in the world with this particular clone, and we planted that on our 80-acre property that's on Seppeltsfield Road, which is kind of, I guess, one of the most famous roads in Australian wine, with the palm tree lined road. And he planted that in 1994, really just because he got access to it. He wasn't looking to make wine. He's not a winemaker, and he grew that for the first few years, and he sold some back to Penfolds. And Robert O'Callaghan, who owns Rockford Wines, which at the member tastings the last few days, a lot of people knew about Rockford. Basket Press is a pretty iconic wine out of Australia. So he took a little bit of that originally, and then my dad just saw so many cars driving. It was the busiest wine tourist road in Australia at the time. So my dad's like, maybe we should start a wine, or make a wine and sell it. So that's kind of what we did, and really never looked back. I think maybe he would think differently, but yeah.
And I guess, well, talking about Penfolds, very, very famous brand, who for a long time would have had, I guess, quite a hold on Australian fine wine. I guess for a long time they were considered the internationally recognised Aussie fine wine brand. And I guess maybe slightly tenuous link here, but going back to Marlborough, with Ben, talking of kind of big, almost monopolizing businesses, Marlborough has its fair share of those, doesn't it? For those who don't know, New Zealand, as much as it makes a decent amount of wine, there are relatively few wineries. One interesting fact that I learned last year was that New Zealand overall produces about as much wine as Austria, albeit Austria has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of small producers. New Zealand has far fewer, but far fewer with vast amounts of vineyard. And Ben, I wanted to ask you, so obviously working in a region like Marlborough, which is a commercially very significant wine region, and a commercially significant wine region which is largely controlled by 4 or 5 massive producers. As a small producer, which you are comparatively, I mean, compared to those big guys, Zephyr and well, your handful of other labels are teeny tiny. How does that kind of impact the way that you work? What are the challenges that you kind of come up against as a result?
Oh, good question. I think when I did do some marketing at university once, but they talk about the 80-20 rule, and it's quite true. 80-20, if you put that across anything you look at, 20% of it often is 20% of whatever's going on is doing 80% of the work. And if you take New Zealand, Marlborough is 80% of New Zealand's wine industry. Sauvignon blanc is 80% of what's planted, and it's probably controlled, as you alluded to, Freddie. There's probably 4, let's say 6 companies that control 80% of our industry from a volume and probably land holding and grape security. And so but then you've probably got about 600 wineries. So you've got, let's call, 6 are huge, 15 or 16 are medium, Goldilocks, and then there's 600 of anything from 1 ton to 80 ton, and lower. So and like anywhere in the wine world is an eclectic business model, and so I think for us to have any noise, is that what we're talking about, is you've got to be agile. You've got to be in market, and you've got to be true to yourself and have authenticity, and be able to say I and we do this, and we've and that takes a lot of effort because you're sort of jack of all trades a little bit. Is it moniker? Is that the right word?
Yeah, I think
or
so.
my business title is janitor, right?
Yes.
So I'm just called the janitor. I'm not the director. I'm an owner, director, winemaker, whatever. But janitorial services are my expertise. Because you've got to be across the whole business. And I think equally, what happens is the ebb and flow of the wine trade out of Marlborough the last 50 years. We have, and the customer has swayed to large brands, and they've felt comfortable, like an old pair of slippers. But I think now there's a little bit of a change in the tide or change in the winds, and I think it's always consumer driven. If you lose sight of what your drink is up to, you might as well just go home. But there is now a need and a want for some of the fringe or just some more interest and stuff, because everyone's comfortable with the big mainstream. But now they want, hey, what's out there, what's interesting, and it may have to do with organics. We are what we eat, or it might have to do with no family stuff. Is actually I understand that. Or with Sauvignon Blanc, I don't like the big passion fruit characters. I want something more restrained, and that's sort of educational too. It's really cool seeing more of that bell curve flattening out and seeing more. And we provide a huge amount of opportunity and differences and different wines to the consumer. So it's about not being lazy across all those facets. So that's what I find at the moment fascinating. But I also think for Sauvignon Blanc and Marlborough, even though it's brilliant, it is also our Achilles heel a little bit, and we've got to be agile, and we can't be arrogant about that variety and what we think it can do. We've still got to innovate.
Sure, and it's really interesting when I get to spend time in New Zealand. It always strikes me that I think one thing we don't really realise in the UK industry is ultimately New Zealand wine is two different industries within one. Because you've got the large volume. I guess you could just say kind of grocery wines, which it's a whole industry in its own. Often, this is maybe me being a bit cynical, but I think there is some truth in that. Often the real winemaking decisions are actually made by the accounts department in those businesses. And
that's not cynical, mate. That's not cynical.
Well, I think it's fair to say, isn't it? I mean, I've heard some stories, put it that way, and those stories very rarely are about quality first. However, those are that's the majority of the wines that we see on the supermarket shelves in the New Zealand section in the UK, and unfortunately, it does feel like those are the wines that equally influence the consumer. If they stop being such good quality, then unfortunately people just go, "Oh, New Zealand wine isn't great. I don't like it anymore." And we're hearing more and more people really unfortunately saying, "Oh, I don't like Sauvignon Blanc."
And that's quickly, Freddie, on that. The challenge we've got to do now is that group of wines is a vehicle of being introduced to Sauvignon. What's happening is people are now going, "Oh, I'm getting bored of it," and they're leaving that Sauvignon Blanc category. The challenge we've got to do now is go, no, we want them to explore within that varietal and explore more of New Zealand. And I think that's where we're missing. That's where our our industry body, if we're going to be quite truthful on a Monday afternoon, is probably missing a trick a bit to try and keep hold and keep the love with Sauvignon.
Because there is a lot going on. There are some fantastic, there's a lot of fantastic producers, such as yourselves, who are doing really interesting things. You are innovating, you are pushing things forward, and also are working with other great varieties outside of just Sauvignon. So you can kind of explore, vertically or horizontally, I guess. But I just think it's really important to point out to people who may or may not have been lucky enough to go to New Zealand and get under the skin of the industry in the same way, that it's really worth bearing that in mind. Marlborough Sauvignon is not one thing; it's not one category, as popular as it might be. And Ben, I just want to, sorry, Sam, rather, I just want to come back to you in the Barossa. Of course, Whistler has a great reputation now for being well, of course, a quality first producer, but making wines that are that bit fresher. Barossa does have this stereotype of being kind of 16% alcohol, punch in the face type stuff, which is very much not what Whistler's about. But of course, in a region with such a rich history and so many traditional, somewhat old school, let's say, producers. How's that been for you? Have you experienced much pushback over the years?
Mate, I mean, I guess in a little way, yes. The nice thing about I guess the wine industry is I think a lot of people in the Barossa and maybe South Australia in general are starting to realise that we're not a one-trick pony, similar to what Ben's saying. A big punch in the face, arrogant style of Barossa Shiraz is no longer what people are looking for. And again, talking to members the last few days, they're like, "Oh, I remember like drinking it and being like, oh, this is, I mean, it's good. There's a lot of flavour, but it's hard to get through more than a couple of glasses." And that's not really what we're looking for. So, look, for us, we made a decision quite a long time ago to dial it back and to really focus on, that purity of fruit, that elegance that we can get. We are a warm climate here. However, for us, that doesn't mean it has to be over the top alcohol. We can pick earlier. We can make decisions based on acid. We can really, we can do multiple things. We don't need to use brand new American oak for every wine. I'm using no American oak. I'm using all French oak. But I'm really, I think that there's so much more out there that we can bring to the table for the wine world that comes from different decisions in the vineyard, basically. So yeah, I think we have been painted with a bit of a brush, and the last few days, Freddie, have been awesome for me, and probably for Ben as well, because so many people were like, "Wow, this is not what I thought Barossa was all about." And that's a compliment now, because we want to be showing that we can be diverse.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that strikes me about the wines, and we did touch on this when we did these masterclasses in person in Manchester over the weekend, is that you're still, judging on just what's in the glass, you're still proudly Barossan. It's not as though you're trying to make wines that taste like they could be from anywhere else, but at the same time, it's, I guess, trying to work with something that's classically Barossan, but fine tune it and be a bit more conscientious, I suppose, in the winemaking. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and create a product that's a little bit more Moorish, that people salivate over, and people are like, oh, like there is tannin, there is fruit, there is balance, rather than just this huge amount of over the top extraction of fruit. That plummy kind of flavor. So for us, yeah, it's been huge. And I mean, look, we still do make a traditional style, but we've also dialed that back a fair bit. And for me, I think one of the massive things is not only Michael Corbett, who helps me with our winemaking and his vision, but just in terms of not just picking on sugar or Beaumet, we're picking on pH and really looking at the balance of the wine, so that when it comes off the vine, we're showing an expression of that vineyard without manipulating it in the winery, really.
Absolutely. And I guess it goes back to what we were saying right at the beginning of this chat, the importance of getting it right in the vineyard.
Yeah.
And working with really, really good quality fruit, which is something which is, ties ties both you guys, both your wines together, albeit in very different countries. Speaking of, we should probably think about cracking a bottle. So there'll be people who are listening in who've hopefully got the Generation Series Marlborough Sauvignon and Barossa Shiraz. Top marks if you've got both. Let us know in the chat if you have a bottle of one or both of these wines. I've got the red. I have been thoroughly enjoying the Marlborough Sauvignon over the weekend too. I can see that you've got each other's wines, which is a nice touch. So we should probably kick off with talking Sauvignon first. Oh, Ben's got both. Nice one, Ben. That's very organized.
I'm double packed.
You're double parked. And
So
just
do
a
I.
reminder for anyone, if you do have any questions throughout, type them in the chat and we'll come to those as well. So Ben, let's have a little chat about the limited edition Sauvignon. So as I alluded to earlier on, one thing that I really wanted to try and achieve with this wine was replicating that style, which put Marlborough Sauvignon on the map in the first place before it, I guess, was before it was so heavily influenced by the massive companies that we were talking about before. You've done a fantastic job with this wine. This has been incredibly popular over the weekend with the many hundreds of members who came to the Manchester tastings. And it's only just gone on sale as well. So I had a quick look at the numbers. It seems like members are enjoying it, selling well, which is fantastic. So can you give us a bit of background on how you approach this project? Obviously, I got in touch with you and said, hey, would you like to work on this with us? And you did a sterling job, but how did we get from beginning to end?
Look, I'm the classic sort of person that can't say no to anything, particularly when you've got a guru visionary by the name of Freddy Bulmer who comes and knocks on your door and says, "This is what we're doing." And I take my hats off to the Wine Society. You know, it must be a big project having this 150th piece in the three tranches you've done, you know, throughout the ages. That just didn't start last year. It's been a long time in the making. So I feel quite humbled, and there wasn't really an opportunity to say nah. It was certainly yeah, this is cool. So
well, you said yeah, nah, and I said I'm only taking your first answer. So we went with yeah.
Yeah. So look, I think it's absolutely a brilliant opportunity to deliver a glass of Sauvignon with just showing the style of what Sauvignon Blanc was in the 80s and 90s, and then has become, you know, in the 50 years later type thing. And so you've seen a real style change across those 50 odd years. Then just technically speaking, you started with methoxypyrazines, which is the classic cat's pee on a gooseberry bush comment that was coined when we first rocked up into the UK with our wines. And then we've moved to that real more quite tropical, overt sort of characters sometimes that you see. And the real challenge I wanted to show was you can actually they're sort of pendulum swings, but if you run the line through the middle down between, you can really show off what their variety can express with restraint. And I see there's a comment came up by one of the watchers, Mark Phelps, saying great restraint on both wines, and I think that's a real key, because we want you to enjoy the wines right through to the last glass in the bottle. I think if the wines are too swung one way, they're not in balance. You know, they're just delivering one part of what that varietal expression can be from Marlborough. And so I set out to show off brilliant greens, so ripe greens, but also some ripeness, not overt ripeness, but some, you know, guava and melon notes. And then the real key, I think, with any wine is they've got to have structure and balance, and they've got to deliver that fruit all the way to the back of the palate. Like, you can't be sold short. You know, tadpole wines are not, you know, you need the full flavour and the full zone. And what I've found, particularly in Manchester, and the wines that Sam and co are doing, is even they've got restraint and they've got crunchiness and they're juicy and they've got vitality. And if we can hold on to that vitality of the varietal, it'll age as well. You know, we talked about aging of Sauvignon as well. This wine will age 10 years. and it'll go into wonderful sort of citrus, salty, savoury it won't go into canned peas or asparagus. Wine that's got longevity, and sense of place, which is Turing or YY, and hopefully deliver a really good drink.
Absolutely, that's of course the most important thing. I don't know. You cut out a little bit there,
and that's
Ben.
that's the aim at the end of the day.
You were saying, I think, about how you're trying to avoid the sort of style that people now associate with the kind of the tinned asparagus, those tinned greens. That's not what we want at all. But what this wine has for me, which is lovely, is a really nice, ripe, vibrant citrus throughout, which is great. And it's interesting you're saying about the ageability of this wine, because that's something which a lot of people, I'd say most people, would not think of when it comes to Marlborough Sauvignon. A wine which can actually age, and of course, to age well, you need plenty of acidity. This wine has that. It's a very, very fresh, crisp, refreshing wine. But you need intensity, and I think perhaps with Marlborough Sauvignon, a lot of people think of it as being intense, but actually I think what they're calling intensity is actually blousiness in a lot of examples these days from the big players. But really well made Marlborough Sauvignon, as you guys do at Zephyr, and with this example as well, has intensity, not blousiness. I mean, this is actually quite a refined, pared back style of wine, while still having great concentration of fruit, great concentration of acidity. So I look forward to trying it as any keeping around.
Look, we don't want to blow your nostril hair off.
No,
exactly. because it just overwhelms every sense known to man and womankind, and then it just dulls everything, and you sort of back away. You need to have, again, restraint, and it needs to have good poise. And the other way I look at it is, the wine shouldn't be the ego in the room. So
is that reserved for the winemaker?
Wine.
I think we've lost you a bit there, Ben. Hopefully your signal comes back on. Don't know if you can hear us. It's a bit patchy in that bottle shop there in London.
Sorry,
that's all good. We can hear you. We can hear you again now. But I think we got what you were saying there. The wine shouldn't be the ego in the room.
The other thing, I don't know if I can chime in, just tasting.
Yeah, please do, Sam. Yeah,
tasting that wine, but balance. Like it's a pretty key word. Is so many. I hate to say it, but Sauvignon Blancs of some of the bigger players that I've tried, and I've helped make wine at Oyster Bay, and I don't want to point fingers, but like the balance isn't quite there. Like, whereas that wine's got this, on the nose and the palate, it's got this really nice purity, and that acid. It seems to, the fruit versus acid, it has drive, and even length. Which I'm saying that I might sound surprised, but on your mouthfeel there's length. And it's not just like falling away after you swallow. There's this nice length to it, which is really quite refreshing. So well done, mate.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a serious wine. One thing that was really reassuring at the tastings in Manchester, and this was without me giving members necessarily the background or what the approach was initially, but there were numerous members that came up to me and said, "Oh my God, that's delicious. That reminds me of the very first time that I ever tried a Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc back in 1990, whatever." That's the closest that I've had ever since then. And I remember just distinctly saying to one guy, "Brilliant. I almost want to shake your hand. That's exactly what we were aiming for here." It kind of takes it back to where it all began. And I think does a really, really good job of that. And tasting this wine, you kind of go, okay, well, I can see why it's become so successful as a category, because this is just so delicious. But I do think it's a particularly accomplished example. And as Sam says, it's got a really long finish. It's got a real beginning, middle, and end, which is really important and is exactly what you want. So hats off to you, Ben. It's been a real pleasure working with you on this wine, and I've been genuinely really proud of it. I've been really excited about both of these wines actually in the run up to them launching, because obviously I've known about them long in advance of them actually hitting our, albeit digital, shelves, if you like. But I'm really proud of this wine, and it's been great to see it get such a good reception from the beginning. So cheers to you.
Yeah, well done, Freddie. Well done. Great wines.
Well, yeah, no, it's worked out really well. So yeah, hats off to you. And I guess one thing which, well, there's a few things weirdly that tie the two wines together, and we have touched on your approach and getting it right in the vineyard, you two guys. But that acidity, that freshness, that kind of beginning, middle, and end and length, I think is something which does tie both of these wines together. So, Sam, it'd be great to move on to the Barossa Shiraz. And if you could give us a bit of background on this, because again, we're trying to recreate a style which was really popular just say 2-3 decades ago. Be great to know kind of how you approach that challenge.
Yeah, I mean, similar to Ben, I was really humbled and excited to be asked to make something like this for the Wine Society. 150 years is pretty serious, and it's a big anniversary. And so when Freddie and I were having a Negroni, and he asked me to do it, I was very humbled. So thank you, mate, for the opportunity. But yeah, we instead of just going, all right, like this is what we usually play with, this is what we usually do, we thought, well, let's really take this on board, and let's pick a site and a story that's going to resonate. So what I did was I actually rang a vigneron who lives quite close to Penfold's original site out in Ebenezer, which is a sub-region of the Barossa, on sandy soils. It's northern Barossa, furthest north. Like this vineyard itself is one of the last vineyards north of the Barossa. And I went to school with Lachlan. He's a second generation grape grower on that property. And his dad used to sell some fruit to my dad when he was at Penfold. So, stories and wine are synonymous, and they need to be real and authentic. And that's what we really wanted to do with this. So, we ended up, he also runs organics, which I do on my property behind me there. And so that was another important thing is making sure we're using fruit that is of the right ethos. So yeah, we talked to Lachlan and we found a certain spot of his vineyard. This is very sandy soils. It's seriously alluvial, and I think that helps to bring out. You can get serious density from it, but it also, if you're picking it at an earlier time, it can bring out purity. So this wine it's also a lot less oak. Back in the day, like 70s, they weren't buying brand new American oak every single vintage for every single wine. So for me, we really thought about talking to Michael about the oak program for this, and it's 100% French oak pungents. They used pungents, second, third, fourth year pungents, and I think that we're not trying to go over the top of the fruit. Fruit's the key here. This is what we're trying to showcase. We're trying to showcase the vineyard, and there's even over the last few days, people talking about the color. There's a real vitality to the wine, and energy to the wine, which I hope, people understand that's simply by not over extracting it and elongating that élevage, I guess, in barrel.
Absolutely. And one thing that I know that a couple of people commented on initially were saying, oh, Barossa Shiraz, it's only 2023 vintage, that's very young.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, this is really approachable. It's a lovely drink now, and there's nothing about it that makes me think, oh, we should have given it another year or two. Does that approachability at this stage come purely from picking and the oak program that you mentioned?
Yeah, I believe so. Also skin time.
Right.
You know, we're not over extracting it. We're not working this wine too hard. It's very gentle. You know, most of what we do is, you know, we're foot stomping or hand plunging a lot of our ferments just to wet the cap and not extract too much color. Not that we don't want color, but that can bring a lot of broodiness to the wine. So, you know, for us, this is made in that style that is more of a drink now style. And yeah, I had, you know, before some of these members tried it, they're like, oh, 23, that's pretty young for a Barossa. And I was like, that was before they tried it. And then they're like, that's drinking pretty well. And I don't know, a fun stat for everyone listening here is Australia is the fastest country in the world from buying a bottle of wine. So let's say you guys buy it on the Wine Society website, gets delivered to your door. 16 minutes in Australia it takes for an Aussie to open a bottle of red. So, you know, we're sitting there going, why are we making like these wines to, you know, be opened in at least 5-10 years when people are drinking it in 16 minutes? So, you know, and that's where, Freddie, the acid will hold up and it will age, just like Ben's Sauvignon Blanc. The acid's key. And I must admit, I've only learnt this relatively recently. You know, like acid is seriously key in ageability. You know, you look at Barolos and stuff like that. Like it's really key. So yeah, I don't know. You can drink this now. You can enjoy it now, and you could also put it down if you like. I'm a 5 to 7 year guy. I'm not a 15-year bloke that wants to hold on to it and see those tertiary characteristics. I like fruit. We grow fruit. You know, that's what we grow. So I want to see it.
Absolutely. And what was really interesting for me over the last few days, tasting this alongside your Shiraz, which we have available on the website at the moment, and the estate Shiraz, the very, very top level. So we kind of got 3 tiers, if you like, 3 price points. What's fantastic is seeing the kind of house style follow through all of those, but whilst also being able to see kind of clear steps in terms of complexity, ageability, and so on. This wine, albeit, you know, the most kind of entry level, if you like, of those 3, still really captures the Whistler style beautifully. And then you go right up to your estate level wine at the very top, and you can still sense that freshness, that balance, that finesse, albeit with slightly more kind of complex layers of flavor. So it's really interesting to see that throughout the wines. Now, I know that there was one question from Catherine, which I think we should come on to in just a sec. So I'll hand over to Catherine in a second. I just wanted to say, though, first of all, Sam, just like with Ben, thank you so much for your work on this wine. As I said before, I'm so proud of both of these wines. They're just fantastic quality, and I've been really, really itching to be able to talk about them and see members enjoy them, frankly, because that's what it's all about. You know, we want people to enjoy really nice drinks, and it's always so exciting when you know you've worked on something really, really special, and there's kind of a build up to it coming out. I think this has been great. I've been drinking lots of both of these wines even before we officially launched them, because I've known about them for, as I say, for gosh, when did we start talking about it? Well, it must be over 18 months ago now. So for quite a long time. So it's fantastic, and it's worth pointing out to members watching that we have a great selection of wines from both Zephyr and Whistler on the website. So you know, give these a go if you really like these, which I'm sure you will. Then do sort of explore the rest of the range, because all the wines have this lovely finesse, this lovely focus, and the word vitality's come up a couple of times, and that carries through to all of these wines. So yeah, do make sure to explore them. Now, Catherine, I know that you had a question, I think, for Ben.
Yes, we do. And it is actually based on what you were just saying about the rest of the range. So we've got a member that's watching today. They don't have the Generation Sauvignon Blanc, but they've got the Zephyr 6, and they're just curious as to how it compares. So the sort of similarities or differences.
Yeah, we didn't really go into that in the bottle. So the Generation series, so we run 150 acres, 2 vineyards, pretty much between Dad and myself. And the Generation series is off those 2 vineyards. So it's a 2 vineyard, you know, managed and run by us and farmed. It's sort of like a 40 blend, whereas the Zephyr 6 is 100% off our what we call our home block, which is the 60% part of the generation. So, and that parcel provides the richness through the mid palate, whereas the 40% in the generation provides a bit more of a restrained, leaner drive through the palate. So you'll find that the Zephyr 6 is probably a bit richer, being from Dillon's Point as a sub-region, so close to the coast, and that gives us a bit more mouthfeel, not ripeness, but just a richer richness through that through the wine. And I will say one thing too. I think the great thing about the two wines is we talked about it yesterday, but I see a real there's sympathetic or respect to the fruit, and that's why the fruit and the wines look so brilliant in the glass. And I think particularly that Barossa Shiraz, it's just beautifully poised and it's got great fragrance.
Absolutely, yeah, nicely put.
Tony later.
You can polish off the rest of the bottle after we get off this as well. Well, you've got both wines, so you're in a good position to have a good night there.
The check's in the mail, mate. The check's in the mail.
All right.
Brilliant. Well, I just want to really say a big thank you to both of you guys for taking the time to not only log on this evening, but Christ, fly halfway around the world to come and spend time with us and to come and talk about your wines. It's such a privilege and a pleasure working with you. And, not only because the wines are just fantastic. I mean, we've seen that this evening, but you're just bloody good guys to be able to work with. I really appreciate it. The relationship side of things is such a big part of this job, and it really matters a lot to me, and it matters a lot to the Wine Society, something that makes us, I think, a truly unique business. And so it's great to be able to kind of share those ethos with you guys too. So yeah, huge thank you for your support. And thanks for making the trip so that you could do an online tasting in the same time zone. It was either get up very, very early in the morning or fly to the UK, and you opted for the latter. So thank you for that.
Well, I don't know. I'll probably speak for Ben as well, but you're thanking us, but we should thank you, Freddie, and the Wine Society and the members who make all this possible, because at the end of the day, we're farmers giving it a good crack, and we really appreciate what you guys do and buying our wines. It means the world. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's great. Thank you to all the members who've logged on, and especially those of you who had a glass in hand as well. Always good to share a drink with you all, and hopefully see you at another event. And thank you to Catherine too for organising it and running everything behind the scenes. So cheers to you lot. I hope you have a good rest of the night. I'll be topping up my glass in just a second as well, and hopefully see you again very soon. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.